Good morning, Internet. Let's talk a bit about predators and how predatory people can thrive in an environment that's normally collaborative. If you're familiar with evolutionary pressure and how predators evolve in the natural world, it comes quite natural to see that in an environment that is collaborative of human beings, some human beings will evolve to instead exhibit a predatory behavior on the assumption that everybody in the collaborative community is seeking to collaborate. We have seen this in experiments like the prisoner's dilemma, where in game theory, you benefit from collaborating with others. The results from this experiment in psychology does not quite turn out as expected, because it turns out that we have an inbuilt wiring for collaborating that skews the results. Most people do anyway, not everybody. Some people have instead evolved to take advantage of this collaborative wiring. In collaborative environments like open source and cryptocurrency, such predators have very fertile ground for hunting and where to get their next meal. Some environments have a predator to collaborator ratio that is simply too high for any collaborative efforts to emerge. And so, for example, in a typical parliament, you have a far too high predator to collaborator ratio for any default emotion to be trust in between people. Instead, you assume that people are predators. This predator notion is important because you would typically talk of such people as narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths. But sticking a label onto them, a psychiatric diagnosis in particular, sends the message that these people are somehow sick and in need of help. That's dangerous. It is dangerous because, as Peter Hitchens argues in this book, The Psychopath Code, which I can really recommend on this matter, what's productive here, what's appropriate here, is to realize that instead of framing it as these people have a psychiatric disorder and are therefore in need of help, the proper approach is to say that these people exhibit predatory behavior and leave victims in their wake who are then in need of help. Predators will not accept help from those they would prey on any more than your lunch would accept help from you in not having lunch. However, the people the predators leave in their wake can most certainly be in need of assistance. These predators hide among collaborators. They try to exhibit signs that make the collaborators see the predators as a collaborator. And then, when the time is right, they prey. It is not possible to imagine what these people are capable of. You cannot warn people who have not experienced a predator about what is likely to happen. Because where normal people feel some sort of embarrassment over too large a lie, we all lie to small extents. That's human nature. When the scale says I'm 94 kilos heavy this morning, I might say that, 90 or so. That's how much we typically lie. A predator would instead say something like, the scale said blue, or 15 helium balloons, something that is completely nonsensical, but which appeals to the collaborator, which appeals to the prey in terms of being a very attractive bargain. So, as an example of a predator that I have encountered earlier, and whose name was Cecilia Becker. She's married now to some poor guy, so her name is no longer Cecilia Becker, but nevertheless, let's talk about Miss Becker for a while. One of her previous exploits was getting romantically involved with a senior surgeon at a hospital. And she later convinced this person to lend her money, a reasonably large sum. And once that transaction was on her bank account, she promptly went to the press and said that this surgeon had paid her for sex on the hospital grounds. This way, she got her reward, which is attention, and this exposure, if you like. Never mind that she left a life in complete shatters behind her. And figure this, if you got romantically involved with somebody and your friends would warn you that this person is going to trick you into transferring a small amount of money to her account and will then go to the press and get full pages about how you had solicited sex workers at your work and you'll thereby get fired and your career as a senior surgeon will be ruined. This would not be among your list of remotely plausible scenarios. This would not be conceivable. And this is exactly what the predators prey on. The fact that their behavior is simply inconceivable among people who are conditioned to collaborate. They do not feel embarrassment at lies. This is one defining factor. They are incapable of feeling embarrassment in the face of making outrageous lies. When I feel a little bit of embarrassment saying, maybe 90 kilos, they can say 15 helium balloons with a completely straight face. They do not feel embarrassment in front of people they want to prey on, any more than you feel embarrassment in front of your lunch. When they are giving out outrageous lies, what they are feeling is something akin to a fisherman trying a new bait on their hook. No more. So people who see the signs can't warn others because they'll be met by disbelief. This is one of the tricky things about dealing with a predator. If you're trying to warn others, the predator will strike back at you with their weapon of disbelief and try to paint you as the toxic individual that need to be excised from the group. This makes the situation very tricky if you have not encountered a predator before. This is take 2 of this video. In take 1 I was talking about a real person. In take 2 I'll be talking about a fictitious predator instead. And in inventing this fictitious person, I'll be inspired by the name of Craig Shaw Gardner, a very underappreciated author I was binge reading in my teens. And I'll add a new last name for this fictional person, and I'll make up the fact that he has an extremely small penis and therefore pick the last name Wanker. Now, this might seem an immature and unprofessional remark from me, but since A, I am usually neither of those things, and B, you are a smart person. Since you're watching this video, you're probably already concluded I have another reason altogether for dropping that remark. And this is indeed true. You can find it with little effort, and I think you'll find it quite humorous to boot. Regardless, where Craig Shaw Gardner writes humorous fantasy novels, this fictional person, Craig Shaw Wanker, writes fictional fantasy tweets without any humor whatsoever. And it's important that when Mr. Wanker is writing these tweets and writing these remarks, he feels no embarrassment. And he's typically writing huge lies in order to bait people, feeling nothing more than a fisherman trying a new bait. So when he's writing outrageous lies, like, I am Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, or I am Arthur, king of the Britons, resurrected by doctors at the Mogadishu University Hospital, or I am Elizabeth II, Queen of the Britons, in reverse drag, 10 truckloads of Botox and a ridiculous wig. He doesn't feel anything. He's just trying a new bait to get lunch. And this is crucial to understand. This is the same principle that Nigerian scammers use. They are posting an outrageous lie, hoping that some people will trigger on the remote chance that it might be true. The remote chance that it might be true. This is the same principle that Mr. Wanker is using. Same principle as the Nigerian chain letter scammers. And if you had seen the early presentations from Mr. Wanker, you would notice that they are beyond imbecile. This person has no technical understanding whatsoever. Like a predator hiding in a technical environment, though, Mr. Wanker has learned to speak a language that is remotely technical and is getting away with plagiarism for the rest of the effort. When academic papers are discovered to be blatant plagiarism, at worst, this predator goes into hiding for a few minutes, a few days or so, and then pops back up like nothing has happened, like a fisherman deciding that this bait was no good and just trying another bait and feeling nothing more than what you feel for your lunch. Mr. Wanker is not even a particularly good predator. That's what's seriously annoying about this. When we were in the European Parliament, well, the Pirate Party is still in the European Parliament, but not from the Swedish delegation. When I was working in the European Parliament, we would have amateur predators like Mr. Wanker for breakfast before we would head on to challenges. However, he is operating in such a trusting environment, the cryptocurrency environment, that people want him to be collaborative. People want everybody to be saying the truth. People don't want to believe that somebody only regards them as their next meal. But this is the case with predators. And over time, this makes them easier to spot. Mr. Wanker could not even plagiarize Hello World without getting it wrong. This is how painfully awful a predator Mr. Wanker is. And so, you might ask yourself at this point, and it's a legitimate question, that don't all people exhibit predatory behavior like this to some degree? And that might be accurate. As in, what's the difference here? I I'm arguing, again with the help of Mr. Hitchens, that there is one key difference that sets genuinely predatory people apart from those who are merely trying to pull a fast one. And I guess we all have at some point in our lives. What sets predatory people apart is that when they are caught out, when we are pulling a fast one, we sometimes get caught doing so. When predators are trying a bait that doesn't work, they get caught doing so. What sets predatory people apart is that normal people, when caught, will correct their behavior. Predatory people will try harder not to get exposed as predators. They will not correct the underlying behavior. This is a key difference. And this is what we need to bear in mind when we see Mr. Wanker initially plagiarizing papers word for word, and later realizing that people are actually capable of bloody Googling the bullshit Mr. Wanker is publishing. Mr. Wanker is instead caught changing one word in every sentence to its synonym, so that it'll be harder, but not impossible, to find that the work is indeed just blatant plagiarism. This is key predatory behavior. Predatory behavior. This predator has also been gloating left and right about how much money he has. This is, again, predatory behavior. He's dangling this bait in front of you like a Nigerian oil magnate who just needs to transfer $15 gazillion out of the country and will give you $2 quadrillion if you just happen to give him the authority to withdraw money from your bank account. However, Mr. Wanker has given us one specific data point here, saying that I am a billionaire. I know lots of other billionaires. I'm on Forbes 100 richest list. This becomes a concrete data point, because we can compare Mr. Wanker and his known accomplishments, or whatever we might call them, to who's on number 100 on Forbes' actual richest people list. And once we see who's on number 100, we can make a judgment call whether it's reasonable that Mr. Wanker is above position 100 or nowhere near it. And it turns out that at position 100 on Forbes 100 richest list, we find an Elon Musk. So this is where we can make a judgment call. If Mr. Wanker has accomplished more than this Elon Musk, or if he's frankly just full of shit. Chronically full of shit, I might add, but also dangerously so, because he's a predator. When encountered with a predator, you need to understand that there's no talking people out of this behavior. They have evolved into being this person. And you cannot talk them out of predatory behavior any more than your lunch can talk you out of having lunch. All you are to them is their next meal. All you are to them is their next meal. In this kind of scenario, other people are your superpower. Predators typically divide and conquer. They say different things to different people to try and see which bait works best. This means that when you're talking to other people about a suspected predator, you will quickly see that this is not right here. Something is not right here. Other people are your superpower, not just for comparing stories, but also for support and comfort in dealing with a wake of destruction this kind of people leave behind them. So, as a final note, what do you do when it is obvious that you have a predator in your community? And one sign that you really have a predator in your community is that this particular individual is taking up a ridiculous amount of mind share, which would otherwise go to collaborating and forwarding the purpose of the community. If your entire community is instead talking about Mr. Wanker and what he's doing and what he's not doing, and in particular, if Mr. Wanker is forcing you in subtle ways to relate everything you want to do to how Mr. Wanker would respond to it, then this is a surefire sign that you have a dangerous predator in the community. And this predator must be excised from the community. Any engagement with this predator, any engagement, means the predator wins. So, going forward, frankly, I don't want to see any stories in the Bitcoin community about what Mr. Wanker is doing, what Mr. Wanker is thinking, what Mr. Wanker is planning to do or might do, or what other people are saying about Mr. Wanker. Predators like this needs to be dropped like a bad habit. And remember these final words on predators. They are wired to prey on people seeking to collaborate, people like you. There is no talking them out of predatory behavior any more than your lunch can talk you out of having lunch. The only winning move is not to play at all. And also, while I'm at it, remember that anything predators are saying are made up on the spot. They are trying a bait out of impulse. They usually have poor impulse control, to be frank. And anything Mr. Wanker says about patents, about what rights he might or not might have, are made up on the spot. Anything he says as to what his patent might cover is made up on the spot. Nothing a predator says can be taken at face value. Nothing. And if you haven't encountered a person like this before, it's a rough awakening. But once you know they exist, you can deal with them. And at the end of the day, a better place to be in.